Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today in this video I'd like to discuss my issues with basically living in Japan and also with working here in Japan. Well, basically, as I pointed out in my other video, living and working in Japan is totally opposite to visiting Japan as a tourist. Therefore, for you guys wanting to come to Japan to work or to live, be aware that the culture and the working environment is totally different to the West. So, for those who don't know, I'm basically here in Tokyo. I've been around Japan to Osaka, to Nagoya, and also to the north part of Japan. And I've been to Japan 3 times before. Therefore, I have a good sort of understanding of Japan at this point in time. Of course, I'm not a native Japanese person. Therefore, I don't have the in-depth understanding of the native Japanese. However, I've been studying here in Tokyo and I've been meeting foreigners living here in Tokyo, and through what I hear and what I gain when it comes to information, I mean, living in Tokyo is not actually that particularly easy. What are the main points which I found hard living in Japan? Living here in Japan, I think one of the biggest problem, of course, when you land from the plane is the language barrier. Therefore, coming to Japan without having a strong understanding of Japanese is going to be quite a difficulty and also quite an obstacle when it comes to actually living and working in Japan. As I said before, I had been self-studying Japanese for around 3 years. However, due to my commitments as a junior doctor, I couldn't take up my studies as seriously as I wanted, and after these 2 years I decided to come here to Tokyo and pursue a more in-depth Japanese studying at a language school here at Ueno. And of course the aim of that is basically becoming fluent in Japanese and also passing the JLPT examinations. However, the language itself is not that easy to learn. After 3 to 4 years of studying the language, I still have difficulty and I'm still struggling actually to read entry and then 2 level type of comprehensions. The biggest barrier and problem to Japanese learning, in my opinion, is technically the kanji. So when it comes to kanji, there are many applications, many flashcards available online, many books. However, I think, in my opinion, in order for one to learn kanji adequately, you need to have, number 1, exposure to kanji. Therefore, being here in Japan, in Tokyo or in Osaka or any other city, and being on a daily basis exposed to kanji helps you learn the language better. And also, kanji should be learned in context. Kanji, in my opinion, and what I personally believe kanji to be, kanji is a sort of pictogram which indicates a particular meaning. So a kanji in a sentence basically is there because it makes the sentence more short. Japanese, if they had to write every single sentence with hiragana or katakana, it would be actually more complicated than if it had kanji. So kanji actually makes a sentence shorter, more compact, and the kanji gives meaning to the sentence, like byoin, for example, like watashi, inu, like neko. The kanji gives it a symbolic meaning, and therefore you can identify this sentence more precisely when reading Japanese text. For those who have watched or tried to read Japanese text, you can see that Japanese text actually has a very difficult lack of sort of structure. Therefore, some Japanese texts are written horizontally, some have no start or ending, and therefore kanji itself tends to give it a sort of definition. So for those of you coming to Japan, I think that one of the biggest barriers here in Japan, of course, is the language. Secondly is basically working here in Japan. Finding work in Japan as a foreigner and not having a university education or not having a high level of Japanese speaking skill or Japanese level, JLPT level, the bare minimum level in order for one to work in Japan, I think, is around N3 or N2. After that, of course, the N1 is the most preferred level, which is near native level speaking. However, obtaining the N1, of course, is extremely difficult, and after 3 years or 4 years that I've been studying Japanese, I did not manage to even get my N3. So hopefully I will try to get my entry by summer or by next year. I really hope I can pass it. So apart from the language, most companies, unfortunately, they sometimes tend to discriminate towards a foreigner because, of course, there is much more Japanese than there are foreigners, and why should they pick a foreigner over a Japanese person? However, when it comes to certain industries, I mean like the IT industry, like graphic design, like programming, like coding, finding a job here in Japan actually does not require Japanese language skills. Therefore, if you're a programmer or a coder, or you're in IT, and you have a background and a good working background or experience in the area, I think getting a job might be easier than if you, for example, work in a particular field like art, like design, or like, for example, psychology, etc, etc. And also, like me, in the medical field. Medicine here in Japan is not an easy field to get into. It's not easy in my home country, so getting in medicine or within the medical field here in Japan is actually quite a difficult task. So finding a job here in Japan, I think, is another major obstacle to, I think, living in Japan. Another problem, apart from getting the job, is once you get the job, is the working hours. So Japan is one of the countries with the longest working hours on planet Earth. So the Japanese tend to work very long working hours, they have very little time off, and also are offered very low or limited vacation days or vacation leave. Most companies might give you 1 week of vacation per year. Most of the times after work, for example, you might need to go drinking with your Japanese colleagues in, for example, bonekai or nomikais, where your colleagues and your boss bond together. And most of the times this is a company event and you're sort of requested to go. This might be nice if you do it a few times per year. However, doing it on a weekly basis or even twice weekly basis, like in the Christmas months, they have bonekais, business meetups and drinks with other businesses and clients, and these might range in around 2 to 3 per week within the Christmas period time. Doing this on a regular basis might not be healthy for you, and it might lead to unhealthy behaviors and also to mental health disorders, etc down the road. Therefore, Japan, although people might think is not a country which, where people are drinking alcohol as much as the West does, actually the Japanese drink quite a lot of alcohol, and also the working hours are quite long. So once working here in Japan, you have to consider what type of job you want to do, and also the working hours, and also whether or not you're single, married, or have a kid or a family, because this of course will impact your life and also your availability to work. And also another point I'd like to emphasize here in Japan is that of renting. Renting here in Japan, in order for one to be given a rent contract, you might need to present your work documents, your visa sponsorship, and also prior to renting you will need to pay a particular sum of money, being, for example, 200,000 to 300,000 yen as a lump sum before you actually start renting your apartment. Now, most apartments here in Japan come without most utilities. For example, they don't have a cooker, they don't have a microwave, you don't have a bed. Most of the apartments here in Tokyo are very small, and they are basically given to you on a shell basis. Coming from Europe, where when you rent a place you're given like the refrigerator, the bed, the kitchen is complete, etc, here when you might rent some apartment, maybe some apartments do provide these things. However, when you rent a particular apartment in Tokyo, for example, you might get an apartment which has literally nothing installed, and it just has basically the gas, the hot water, and the connections to the sink, basically. So you might need to buy the refrigerator, the microwave, your bed, a futon. You might need to rent a futon, for example. You might need to buy cutlery, drinking ware, tableware, etc. So the rents here in Japan, literally you're paying for the ground and the floor you're sleeping on. So that can be quite a hard reality when stepping to Japan, and coming here also requires a decent amount of financial savings. Of course, my last point on difficulties of living here in Japan is opening a bank account. When you're a Gaijin, when you're a foreigner living in a foreign place like Japan, of course most companies prefer and most banks prefer to deal with Japanese citizens and Japanese clients, because here in Japan the Japanese are safer to work with if you're a bank, and also there's a lower risk of fraud happening. Unfortunately, fraud being more prevalent in the West and Western countries, Japanese banks are more reluctant to open a bank account for a foreigner working here in Japan, unless they have, for example, a spouse, or they have either paperwork from their company which shows that they are clear to do so, or a company or a particular official helps you open a bank account. So if you're coming here to Japan to work, most companies, most English language schools, etc can help you open a bank account in the country. And not all, of course, language schools will help you do that. However, some language schools or some companies themselves will provide you with a assistance of opening a bank account, of renting, of agents who you can contact for rent, etc, etc. If you're lucky enough to have this laid out for you, that's great. I mean, if you're coming to Japan. However, for those of you who are here and they want to rent, or they want to rent before working, that might be an issue, because Japan has a strict set of rules and renting an apartment with an address might not be that easy. Apart from that, I think coming here as a foreigner, it's also good for you to know that you might feel isolated, you might feel pressured by the system. However, don't let that get to you, and you must keep always and maintain a positive mindset in order for you to achieve your goals. Although you're a foreigner and you're basically an outsider in the system, of course, following the rules, keeping within the rules, alright, improving your language skills, trying to make some Japanese friends here in Japan, in Tokyo or in Osaka, depending on the city where you want to live, can help you bolster your life and also your career prospects. I hope the video was interesting, guys. Thanks for watching my video. If you need anything, of course, let me know. Here I make some videos. Anything you want to know, I'm happy to help out with. Subscribe to my channel and see you in the next one.